Number 10. Velocity. Velocity, as her name kind of implies, has the ability of super speed. Although a pretty basic power, it is nonetheless incredibly useful. Imagine receiving a punch from someone who's moving near Mach 13. You're done. You ain't coming back. They punch you in the jaw, sorry, you no longer have a jaw anymore. That's just how it goes. Velocity has been clocked at running at speeds of Mach 13, and she is actually holding back because she's afraid if she runs any faster, she could destroy the Earth. And she likely could. Without something like DC's Speed Force to bend the laws of physics, moving at such extreme speeds at ground level could do terrible things to the Earth's atmosphere, as well as possibly incinerating anything on or near her path. Just think about that for like a little bit. Cyberdata, the group that gave Karen Taylor the cybernetic enhancements that turned her into Velocity and let her move at her crazy speed, also implanted Kevlar under her skin to prevent extreme damage from running at those speeds. I don't know, I feel like you gotta do a little bit more than that, but hey, I just work here. She also has a cybernetic device called the Brain Box that lets her process information at hyper speeds, which is something that at least won't destroy the planet. Number 9. Savage Dragon. The Savage Dragon is one of Image Comics' most popular and long-lasting characters, and he has been around since his debut as just Dragon in Graphic Fantasy #1 in June of 1982. Basically, the Savage Dragon woke up butt naked and with no memory in a burning field. He was a giant green man with a big old fin on top of his head and super ripped like most heroes are. Now, what he didn't know at the time was that he was actually an alien conqueror named Kerr who originally came to Earth to conquer it, but was betrayed by 2 scientists. He was an enhanced member of the alien race called the Krillin, or Krylin, and his enhanced Krylin/Krillin physiology gave him superhuman strength, agility, and stamina, healing abilities, and telepathic resistance. Now, one of my favorite parts about this hero is that instead of joining a superhero team and being a typical hero, the Dragon actually wound up being a member of the Chicago Police Department and helping with their super freak problem. I think it's kinda cool to ground a character like that, but the nature of his powers still leave him near the top of the list. Number 8. Mighty Man. Different from most of the heroes on this list, Mighty Man is less of a person and more of a power that is passed on from person to person. Mighty Man is a tall, handsome, and ruggedly built blonde man, even when that is definitely not what his host is. So for example, the current Mighty Man is actually a woman named Anne Samantha Stevens, who becomes Mighty Man whenever she taps her wrists together. The power was passed on to her from the previous host Robert Bergman, who fought in World War II. When she's not a superhero, she's actually helping out other superheroes, such as being the nurse that helped the Savage Dragon recover when he was first found with no memory out in that burning field. The Mighty Man powers include flight, invulnerability, leadership, magic, stamina, super speed, and super strength. And it's honestly really easy to draw parallels between him and Shazam, and even the original Thor, who used to transform from Donald Blake. Number 7. Pit. The unfortunate thing about indie comics is that the 2 big guys, Marvel and DC, have done a lot of stuff already. So a lot of characters will be spins on originals, but honestly, sometimes they are way cooler. Pit is basically inspired by the Incredible Hulk, but I don't want that to undermine how cool he is. The giant ball of hulking muscle and rage is a combination of human DNA mixed with genetic material from a race known as the Creed. Pit escaped from the laboratory where he was being studied, but was captured and trained to be an assassin, so that sets him apart already. While on a mission though, a child's consciousness was melded with Pit's, and after this merger, he fled to Earth and found a young boy who is technically his genetic relative. Pit is as crazy strong as he seems to look, and I don't know if you saw the super scary claws, but he has super scary claws, so that's kind of freaky. He also has a degree of telepathy and uses it to make himself an incredible tracker, establishing a mental link with whoever he's tracking, making him able to track them from the other side of the world. He also has emotional control, meaning he can unbalance other people's emotions in order to make them commit errors while fighting. And I don't know why I've never heard of another character doing that before. That's actually really cool. Whereas the Hulk gets stronger the madder he gets, Pit uses pain as a stimulant, making him even more of an aggressive fighter and a D-lifer. Number 6. Mr. Majestic. Jim Lee, who created this character, said he wanted to explore a character who had Superman's powers but was not afraid to use them, which resulted in the character of Lord Magistros, aka Mr. Majestic. He was an alien from the planet of Kara and was their High Lord, and a warlord who felt that he could be judge and jury. So Mr. Majestic has all the powers the Man of Steel has, like super speed, strength, invulnerability, energy projection from his eyes, and all that good super stuff, plus telekinesis and telepathy, except he is essentially extremely brutal and militant. He is not afraid to use his power in the slightest, but it's still aligned to the side of good, for the most part, which does step him apart from other characters like him. He would eventually become the leader of the Wildcats for a time, and when on Earth, he would imprison criminals without a trial, and while he eased up somewhat on his ways, he never truly reverted or became completely good. There's actually an instance where he winds up in Metropolis, and him and Superman talk about their different methods, which is actually pretty cool. Number 5. Void. Void's real name was Adriana Tereshkova, a Russian cosmonaut who, while on a space mission, had her craft destroyed by this crazy silver space orb that bonded with her. The orb was part of an entity named Omnia, who had passed on but had formed herself into several of these different colored energy orbs that found their way to various hosts. Void was basically, well, a void. During a battle, her face is actually literally knocked off of her body, revealing that there's nothing but energy inside of her metal shell body. One of her more useful powers was teleportation, being able to transport her teammates anywhere on Earth. She also has clairvoyance, precognition, being able to see the future, astral projection, chronokinesis, telekinesis, and energy manipulation. The greatest of those abilities was being able to see fragments of what the future held, a very useful ability that helped her and her team, the Wildcats, out on multiple occasions. Void at one point met the Valiant Comics character Solar, and when the two became lovers, their universes merged in a crossover event called Deathmate. So she can also merge universes together, which is, I mean, I'd say that's a pretty powerful ability. Number 4. Angelus. Angelus is an immortal being who's been worshipped by people as early as the Incan Empire back in the 15th century. Her counterpart, or opposite, is the Darkness, an evil entity that has existed since the beginning of time. Now, both entities require human vessels, but the Darkness follows the bloodlines of violent people such as criminals, whereas Angelus can choose whoever she wants. Angelus has the powers of light on her side and imbues in her human host strength, speed, stamina, flight, resistance to injury from earthly weapons, and the ability to create objects of pure light. On top of that, any host of Angelus can recall the memories of previous hosts, which is an extremely useful ability if you really think about it. Angelus does have a bit of a weakness though. To maintain a presence in the body she's occupying, the host body must be in light. Being in complete darkness can drain Angelus and cause death to the host, but Angelus would be fine, so I mean, not the worst of weaknesses, really. Number 3. Invincible. Now, I was going to choose Omni-Man for this top spot, but given how many Superman but brutal characters there are out there and how boring that is now, I wanted to talk about Mark Grayson himself. Mark is a member of the race known as the Viltrumites, which are a group of extremely powerful aliens who, due to their diminished numbers, go solo out into the universe to conquer planets for their empire. Mark's dad, Omni-Man, is the most powerful superhero on Earth, until one day he reveals his true Viltrumite mission and does battle with his son, who convinces him to the error of his ways. Now, Viltrumites are basically immortal. They age at an extremely slow rate, which slows down even further as they mature, eventually stopping altogether. They also get stronger and stronger with age, and every time they are defeated or gravely hurt in combat, they will heal, very quickly I might add, to be even more stronger than they were before. Viltrumites can also fly and survive the vacuum of space. Mark, his dad, and another Viltrumite flew through the core of a planet, completely destroying it, and Mark himself has defeated people much more powerful than him with sheer willpower and determination. He eventually becomes a galactic peacekeeper, bringing the whole universe to a state of complete peace and prosperity. He's actually a really great dude. Number 2. Supreme. Another Superman-like character. Yay! Don't hate me, please. Please. Supreme is known as a prime hero in his universe, meaning he is basically Superman, but more of an homage to the character. The origin of how Ethan Crane gained his powers is a little confusing. There have been two main writers, with the second one, Alan Moore, making him a heroic character, having him exposed to supremium radiation, turning his hair white and giving him flight, incredible strength, near invulnerability, super senses, the ability to project heat beams from his eyes, and speed supreme when he was 5 years old. He fought in World War II, then decided to go off-world and experience almost half a century of space adventures. When he returned to Earth, he was confronted by the Youngblood team, who didn't believe he was who he said he was. He's able to defeat their strongest character, Die Hard, within seconds, and that kinda changes their minds. But now, Supreme has to deal with a very different time period. So in a way, he's almost like Captain America 2, which is kind of a cool combo to have. And number 1, it's Spawn. Todd McFarlane created the character Spawn in May 1992, and this character popped off, selling an epic 1.7 million copies, and he is definitely one of the characters that put Image Comics on the map, and that's an impressive superpower indeed. Spawn tells the story of Al Simmons, a Marine who died in the line of duty and makes a deal with the devil, or more specifically Male Bolgia, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, to come back to life to once again be with his wife Wanda. Simmons returned to the land of the living but was bonded to an organic supersuit that had an extremely long list of powers of its own. Some of his powers include flight, invisibility, phasing, healing factor, shapeshifting, necromancy, superhuman endurance, reflexes, agility, senses and stamina, telekinesis, telepathy, memory manipulation, time manipulation, transmutation, cosmic awareness, chlorokinesis, geokinesis, weather manipulation, hydrokinesis, and immortality as long as his head is intact. Oh, he also has this thing called the Black Dispersal, which allows Spawn to call upon creatures of darkness and sin who will attack beings of light, but who Spawn can also control. These creatures include wolves, bears, worms, and bats, which is kind of rude to all those animals. Spawn also has necroplasmic energy manipulation, which basically equates to vast magical powers, which used to have a limit of 9,999 uses, but were only limited by his imagination. He's been able to conjure up a car key, materialize a box of fine wine for his friends, and even resurrect the dead at the cost of his necrometer. Spawn initially starts out in the shadows, fighting street criminals, but eventually takes the fight back to Male Bolgia, kills him, and becomes the king of hell.
Number 10, the Vicious Circle. They might not be as great of a threat in terms of the area that they cover, but the Vicious Circle still stands as the main antagonist for the long-running Savage Dragon series, first standing as opponents to the Dragon, Cur Dragon, and later to the Dragon, Malcolm Dragon, Cur's son. While Chicago has been known for its criminal gangs and mob bosses since back in the Prohibition days, the Vicious Circle would become the leading crime group in the area. That's how powerful they were. The Vicious Circle was originally led by Antonio Seghetti, known as the First Overlord, who began recruiting mutated freaks into his ranks after they started popping up in Chicago in the 90s. Over the years, the leadership of the Vicious Circle and its members have changed, but their reign over Chicago as the major crime syndicate has stayed. Number 9, Anissa. Anissa is one of the worst in Invincible, although she, like so many villains out there in the series, ends up getting somewhat of a redemption. Anissa is not only a powerful villain because she is a Viltrumite, the same race which Mark is half a part of, and which his dad Nolan is fully a part of, but because of what she uses her powers for. Anissa first arrives on Earth attempting to reason with Invincible in regards to the Viltrumites conquering Earth. When Mark refuses to accept this, she fights him and warns him that others are coming. Basically, the conquering of Earth in Anissa's mind can be done the easy way, or it can be done the hard way. Either way, to her it was happening at that point. Later on, when it's agreed that the Viltrumites will take up residence on Earth and live in secret among their people, breeding to create more hybrid children, Anissa forces herself on Mark when he refuses her romantic advances. Basically, Anissa is the worst of the worst. And friends, if you're not already following us over on Facebook, be sure to head on over, give us a follow, give us a like, it really does help us out here at the channel. Number 8, Malebolgia. Malebolgia is the demon who most people think of when they think of Spawn. He made the deal with Malebolgia so that he might see his wife one last time, but arrived on Earth years after his death. Malebolgia might only be one of the higher demons of hell, but for a time he also stood in for Satan as its ruler, which at the time made him pretty powerful and would also mean he is one of Satan's more highly favored commanders. Urizen could even be more powerful powerful than Malebolgia for all we know. When we think of Spawn, our usual go-to nemesis for the anti-hero is Malebolgia. But when it comes to a villain even that iconic or great, there is someone else puppeteering even beyond what Malebolgia is capable of. Number 7. Omni-Man. Omni-Man is a complex character in the Invincible universe. He is both a hero and a villain, and sometimes is like more of an anti-hero. He's done it all, really. He is the father to Mark Grayson, the protagonist of the story, known as the hero Invincible. While there are times he has fought against Mark, he's also fought beside Mark as well. In season 1 of the animated series, based on the Invincible comic book series, Omni-Man takes on and defeats single-handedly the Guardians of the Globe. Although he initially told his son that he and his race of superpowered beings, the Viltrumites, were heroes who traveled the universe finding worlds to protect, it is later revealed that this was actually a lie. Instead, the Viltrumites are people who travel the universe looking for worlds to conquer, which was also Omni-Man, aka Nolan Grayson's, objective here on Earth. The people of Earth can either surrender and live under Viltrumite rule, or resist and basically be destroyed. Later on in the comic series, however, Omni-Man would go on to become the new Emperor of Viltrum and use his power and influence to protect the people of Earth against other Viltrumites, who would seek, of course, to harm it. Number 6. Emperor Kurr. Emperor Kurr is actually none other than Savage Dragon, but is actually him in the past. He isn't Malcolm Dragon, but instead is Kurr Dragon, known originally as The Dragon, who first appeared in the first issue of the 1992 Savage Dragon miniseries, so the original Savage Dragon. When it comes to Kurr's origins, for years it was pretty much unknown. We simply knew him as the Dragon, with his powers and appearance being widely unexplained. He was found in a burning field in Chicago without his memories, suffering from amnesia. However, finally years later in 2005, we'd learned who this dragon really was. Despite being a hero in the narrative, it turned out that originally when Kurr Dragon came to Earth, he was a great villain, known as Emperor Kurr. He and a group of aliens from his race were traveling in space seeking a new home. Kurr liked the idea of Earth and, despite his people's more peaceful ways usually, decided to raise the planet and conquer it, planning to kill all humans on it. 2 scientists intervened in this plot, wiping Kurr's memories and swapping them out for 5 days worth of TV broadcasts from Earth. Emperor Kurr would later regain his original memory and once more threaten all the humans of Earth. I love that. I love that, like, you can be the major hero of a series and then it's just like, whoop, actually maybe you were a villain the whole time, but you didn't know because you had amnesia. Number 5. Throg. Throg is one of the most powerful villains from the Invincible series. Like Omni-Man, aka Nolan Grayson, aka the father of Mark Grayson, also known as Invincible, Throg is a Viltrumite. And we still don't really know, I don't think, if it's Throg or Throg? I'm not sure if it's like ah or ah, but we're still waiting for this character to appear in the animated series, which will hopefully tell us which way we should be saying it. Still waiting for that season 2. Come on, season 2, let's go. For now though, I'm going with Throg. I'm gonna go with the ah instead of the ah. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you hear a difference when I'm saying it? Throg or Throg? Do you hear it? It's totally different, but I'm gonna go with Throg. Throg is known for being the most powerful Viltrumite around. He was once the Grand Regent of Viltrum, entrusted with finding a successor after the Emperor's death. Really though, Throg wanted to rule. When it was revealed that Omni-Man was the son of the previous Emperor and his successor, Throg fought him, but Omni-Man with some help managed to defeat Throg. Still, this didn't stop the vengeful Viltrumite, who spent his time amassing an army of half Viltrumite offspring, hoping to use them in reclaiming what he believed to be his rightful place as ruler of Viltrum. Number 4. Urizen. Urizen could be even more powerful than Malebolgia for all we know. Urizen also hails from Image Comics' Spawn and even defeated the hero after his escape. Urizen is believed to be older than Satan and Time, one of the oldest demons to have ever existed. He's believed to be so destructive because even Heaven and Hell actually came together in order to ensure Urizen's imprisonment, and Heaven and Hell rarely cooperate in the Spawn universe, considering they both hate the other and basically want them gone. It's also theorized that the only way to defeat Urizen is to imprison them, as they are possibly unkillable. Spawn was only able to defeat Urizen after being killed by them and resurrected with the Green World, which gave Spawn enough power to once more imprison Urizen. Number 3. Gorl the Living Galaxy. Gorl the Living Galaxy is a villain who hails from Image Comics. He is a villain to Supreme, who is an Image character who has also been published by Maximum Press, Awesome Entertainment, and Arcade Comics along the way. So Image, but also sometimes not Image depending on when you were reading it. Supreme made his first appearance in Image Comics Youngblood in issue number 1 in 1992. Goral, the Living Galaxy, was a villain of Supreme's who at one point kidnaps his superpowered sister, Suprema. Goral threatens to destroy the Milky Way if she refuses to join him and become his bride. Suprema agrees and comes with the Living Galaxy, and because time works differently in his home at the edge of a black hole, 30 years would seem to pass for Suprema before Supreme came to her rescue, although that's just because time moves like really quickly there. Despite Supreme's powers, he's basically like Superman, even he decided the best way to resolve the issue would actually be to reason with Goral and simply convince the Living Galaxy that Suprema wasn't really a suitable mate for him, which actually worked in the end. But you know someone's tough when you're like, let's not fight, let's just have a conversation about this. I don't know if I can beat a Living Galaxy, although I don't know, I believe in Supreme. If he needed to beat a Living Galaxy, probably could. Number 2. Satan. When we think of Spawn, our usual go-to nemesis for the anti-hero is Malebolgia. But when it comes to a villain even that iconic or great, there is someone else puppeteering even beyond what Malebolgia is capable of. That would be Satan. Satan is so powerful, almost none can stand against him, especially when he is in his own dimension of hell. Satan is presented as possessing nigh omnipotence and also is omniscient. He's invulnerable, immortal, and packs a super meaty punch. He also has the power of having all of hell as his kingdom, where he is the ruler, meaning that he often doesn't stand alone and comes with a bunch of other demonic beings who will do his bidding when commanded. Number 1. Omega Spawn. Omega Spawn is a villain even more powerful than Satan, if you can believe that. And I know what you might be thinking, but wait a minute, Amanda, isn't Spawn supposed to be a hero in this world? Yes, he is, but also not so much in this case. This Spawn is an alternate version of Al Simmons who no longer possessed any of his humanity. This made the version of the character pretty bad. At one point, he kills everyone on Earth so he can use their souls to destroy heaven. He is also one of the few characters who is shown to be powerful enough to usurp Satan, being given the reign of hell by Satan himself. Satan was also the one to basically take away his last remnants of humanity so that Omega Spawn might become the weapon they needed to defeat heaven. However, this plan backfired somewhat. Omega Spawn would defeat heaven but would also destroy Satan as well. Initially, Omega Spawn was believed to be non-canon, being from an alternate reality where his narrative was never even really finished. However, as the multiverse opened up in the Spawn world and alternate versions of Spawn came together, Omega Spawn was revealed to be the big bad of all those multiversal spawns. So he does exist now in the main canon, and also he's super evil.
At number 10 is Captain Canuck. This guy has some notoriety in the Great North, but still remains one of the smaller heroes who many people still haven't heard of. Created by Comley Comics in Winnipeg in 1975, this Canadian hero basically has no affiliation to any other heroes, he's not part of any alliances, and doesn't exist in any other publications other than his own. His story takes place in the then future year of 1993, when Canada is the most powerful and wealthy country in the world. Sort of a Canadian pipe dream. And even then, the creators had a hard time keeping the story going, with the franchise being discontinued after only 15 issues. There have been other attempts at keeping the story going throughout the years, usually by demand of the small yet loyal fan base of the hero, but the most recent appearance that this hero has made was a web series that was crowdfunded back in 2013 by Smiley Guys Studios. Along with this series came a new publication of the comic, a new issue having come out as recently as 2015. But this was pretty much the first time Captain Canuck has made an appearance in 30 years. He sits further back on the list only because the character himself has a pretty forgettable power set and backstory. But I mean, he only had a short shelf life. I believe if he was given more time, he could have gained a lot more depth and gotten much more powerful. At number 9, we have Spawn. This guy's pretty well known in the comic book community, but some people may not realize that he's not actually part of the DC or Marvel universes. This character was actually originally published by Image Comics, first appearing in 1992 in the self-titled comic Spawn. This guy's story is pretty cool. He's originally a CIA agent named Al Simmons from Detroit, Michigan, who specializes as an assassin. And basically, after butting heads with his director at the CIA, he's betrayed during a mission and killed by said director. And he goes to hell, you know, cause of all the killing. But while he's down there, he makes a deal with a demon named Malebolgia that if he goes back to Earth as a Hellspawn and works his evil deeds on the human plane, he'll be able to see his wife one last time. So that's how he becomes Spawn, a super powerful, basically immortal anti-hero focused on taking down crime rings in the human world. At one point, Spawn actually appears in a crossover with Batman, and Batman unfortunately throws a ninja star at his face and splits it down the middle, rendering Spawn to appear in one of his more notable states known as Shoestring Spawn. Pretty nuts. Okay, at number 8 we've got Sailor Moon. Yes, I said Sailor Moon, fight me. Originally published by Kodansha Limited, Sailor Moon has superhuman powers, a human identity, Usagi Tsukino, and even a superhero alliance known as the Sailor Senshi. So yes, she is considered a superhero, I would say. Okay, originally from a civilization on the moon known as the Moon Kingdom, Usagi is reborn on Earth as the leader of the Sailor Senshi. Her powers are pretty extensive and she often avoids fighting, with most of her powers having attributes of moonlight, love, and healing. But this doesn't make her any less powerful. Her power set is pretty extensive. She manipulates supersonic waves for her attacks, uses powerful kicks, super healing, and uses her tiara as a boomerang, among many other abilities. Throughout the manga, she evolves into more and more powerful incarnations of Sailor Moon, known as Super Sailor Moon, Eternal Sailor Moon, Princess Serenity, and the Neo Queen Serenity, respectively. What makes Sailor Moon so unique and powerful is that she chooses to lead all her actions with love and understanding, even, and sometimes mostly, towards her enemies. She's great! Okay, at number 7 we have X. Part of the Dark Horse universe, X first appears in 1993 by publisher Dark Horse Comics. X has a pretty rocky past and grows into quite a powerful and determined anti-hero. Born an unnamed child, he is experimented on as a baby and abandoned after he is assumed dead in a fire. I know, and you thought your upbringing was tough. He later comes back to life somehow as a teenager with limited to no memory of his past, and he suddenly has powers. But this isn't enough to protect himself from being murdered again. Although this time, it's sorta his fault. He has an affair with a mob boss's wife. When he dies the second time, he comes back again as X, and his goals become to take out all the criminals and corrupt politicians he can get his hands on. This hero's weapons of choice are his pistols, but he's also a skilled swordsman and excels in hand-to-hand combat. I'm honestly rooting for this guy at this point. I mean, he didn't really have any chance at a stable life, so I wish him the best. Not that he needs it. Seems like he can take care of himself. Alright, at number 6 is Plastic Man. Originally published by Quality Comics, this hero was later acquired by DC Comics, but we'll just explore his pre-DC days since that's what this list is all about. First appearing in Police Comics #1 in 1941, Plastic Man is more of a comedic character, known for his slapstick, offbeat adventures. But his origin actually explores a life of crime for his alter ego, Patrick Eel O'Brien. When he first gains his powers, it's after a failed bank robbery that leaves Eel with a bullet wound, lying on the ground, doused in a strange chemical liquid. He's nursed back to health by a monk in a monastery and learns that he's basically become the knockoff Reed Richards. He then goes off in a red and yellow costume with white goggles that hide his identity, and with him is his silly sidekick Woozy Winks, who has been estranged in his own way, but not from his former bank robbing partners, from the mental institution that he'd been ejected from. What's great about Plastic Man is that he isn't interested in justice or prosperity for good, he just wants to be rich. And Woozy Winks' goal is actually just to get back to that institution he was ejected from, or at least the safety of a padded room and a straitjacket. This story is just a fun time and shows the vast possibilities and uniqueness of independent comics. Alright, at number 5 we've got Invincible. Invincible was originally created as part of the Imagine universe by Imagine Comics. Born Mark Grayson, Invincible is actually the son of Omni-Man, and he basically gains his powers as a hereditary trait from his superpowered father. Invincible often finds himself faced off against aliens and sometimes teaming up with his father, who's also an alien, to get things done. Some of his abilities include super strength, flight, and of course, invulnerability. He has a very eventful run as a superhero, and if I were to cover everything he gets involved in, this section of the video would be 20 minutes long. Basically, this guy fights in a few wars, works for the government at one point, and starts a family of his own later in life. This hero is probably one of the most extensively explored straight-up superhero stories outside of the DC or Marvel universes, and his story is pretty great too. Although I don't think we'd expect anything less from the team that brought us The Walking Dead, would we? Check out Image Comics, they've got some good stuff out there, and it contends pretty well with Marvel and DC. And at number 4, I'm putting Midnighter by Valiant Comics. Started in 1988, Valiant pumped out some pretty good characters and storylines. And they were pretty ahead of their time too, with Midnighter being one of the earlier LGBTQ superheroes. I know Midnighter is part of DC now, but for a while there he was solely the property of Valiant. Midnighter, or Lucas Trent, is experimented on by Henry Bendix, who forms the Stormwatch team of which Midnighter is part. And his abilities are pretty extensive and really cool. He's able to run through almost infinite outcomes of any situation in his his mind even before he makes a decision, making him one of the best strategists in the world. And looking at someone as powerful and influential as Captain America, strategy and tactics are always proven to be considered an extremely valuable asset. So I'd argue that Midnighter comes in as one of the most powerful on this list. On top of all that as well, Bendix's fight implants give Midnighter enhanced strength, speed, and durability. And the survival implants offer him enhanced healing, pain tolerance, and environmental adaptation. I just love how useful his powers are, and he just looks so cool as well. At number 3, we've got Shadow Man. Shadow Man is another creation by Valiant Comics, and he's also really cool and quite successful as an indie superhero. And he's a great example of how superheroes don't have to come from Marvel or DC to get their own sprawling franchise. I mean, Shadow Man got his own video game, and Valiant has sold 5.3 million copies of his comics. That's pretty impressive for an indie comic book character. Okay, but what about the actual character himself? So, a young man, Jack Boniface, is born in New Orleans and at a young age is possessed by an extremely powerful voodoo spirit known as Shadow Loa, and his duty becomes to protect the world of the living from the world of the dead. Some of his abilities are basically a fearlessness to evil or danger, super strength and speed, as well as free passage to the world of the dead. What's really cool about this character is that the Shadow Loa, the source of his powers, is a hereditary entity that has followed his ancestors through history. So even when, spoiler alert, Jack dies, his spirit travels back in time and visits the others of his ancestors that had been possessed by Shadow Loa. Then he just wakes up in the present right after his own funeral and keeps going, armed with the understanding of his ancestors' past. It's a pretty cool storyline, and the character design is pretty awesome too. Alrighty, at number 2 we have the one and only Hellboy. We all know this one as well because of how successful the franchise has been. But going way back to 1993, the first appearance of Hellboy was by Dark Horse Comics, and he wasn't really expected to be much as a standalone character. But as his character progresses over the years, his backstory and personality are just so intriguing, and his appearance is so cool that he eventually captures the interest of the world. Hellboy is first introduced to Earth as a baby by Nazi occultists who summon him from hell. He's then raised by Professor Trevor Brutenholm, who starts the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense, or the BPRD. So this combination of Hellboy's good nature with a stable human upbringing, mixed with his immense strength as a powerful demon from hell, it makes for a really cool, strong, and fun character. He's got his iconic look with his right arm made of stone, and his demon horns filed off, and that awesome gun he carries around. Some say he even smells like dry roasted peanuts, which actually isn't so bad. Hellboy is just a great character. A demon paranormal investigator who fights and witches. That's a pretty great recipe for story. And it's proven so, with the movies alone having grossed over $300 million. We all love Hellboy, come on. Okay, finally at number 1 we have Shazam. Another hero that eventually finds his home with DC, Shazam wasn't always part of that universe. He makes his start with Fawcett Comics in 1939. Yes, this guy has been around since the year after Superman was created. And it's pretty obvious but worth noting that his creation is sort of a response to the popularity of DC's Superman. But what's even crazier is that Shazam's original name was actually Captain Marvel. So Fawcett Comics was really trying to make their mark against Marvel and DC to the point where they were actually outselling Superman comics at one point with Shazam. So as expected, Fawcett was taken to court, and DC was able to sue them for damages. But beyond the lore of the inception of the character of Shazam, he's also just a great hero. And the fact that he's still around 90 years later with a bunch of new self-titled issues, tons of featured appearances in other DC comics, a hugely successful movie under his belt, and a sequel coming up is a testament to that. So yes, he's now a DC character, but there's a reason why he was such a hot commodity for DC back in the day. And we also know now that there is too a reason he seems eerily similar to Superman, and that's because he was designed that way. Pretty cool. At number 10 is Jack Staff, the penultimate British superhero. Not actually, this guy is actually known to be kind of a meme hero, but he's notable enough to make it onto this list. Jack Staff is known to have been alive since the Victorian era, which is when he receives his powers. And considering he hasn't aged since then, it can be deduced that he's either immortal or something pretty close to it. He uses a staff, as you could have guessed, and fights bad guys with the use of energy manipulation. This basically just means that he's able to move energy into his staff to strengthen its blows enough to break down walls, and other stuff like that. He was created by Paul Grist under his own publication, Dancing Elephant Press, after his pitch to Marvel for a new Union Jack series was rejected. But since then, Jack Staff has been picked up by Image Comics, so that's a win, right? Hey, DM me on Instagram and let me know if you have any more fun facts about Jack Staff. I'd love to know more about this guy. At number 9, we have Darkman. This is a cool one. This superhero was created in 1990 by director Sam Raimi, who you should all know was the main man behind the first and best major live-action Spider-Man film series. But 10 years before that, there was Darkman, a superhero developed by the writer-director himself for a film of the same name starring Liam Neeson. Darkman doesn't have any actual powers, but when he's beaten up and left disfigured by a group of mobsters, he sets off to take down the crime ring himself. He does this by creating very realistic masks that allow him to impersonate different key players in the ranks of the mob. This film was successful and impactful enough that, at the time of its release, a comic book series with the same name was also released. And yes, this was under Marvel, but Darkman deserves a spot on this list because his origin has nothing to do with Marvel originally. I think there should just be a Sam Raimi superhero category, personally. At number 8 is Dr. Mirage. Published by Valiant Comics, this hero's powers are all concerning the realm of the paranormal, having been born with the ability to see and speak to the dead. But the story told in this series explores how Dr. Shan Fong Mirage suddenly loses her abilities. And this comes at an awful time for her as she's just lost her husband. It's a tale of irony, which I won't spoil the ending of, but it's known to be a very gripping story about love and loss tied into the superhero genre. It's fair to say that there will be a few tear-jerking moments in this one, so avoid it if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff. I mean, Dr. Mirage spends the series trying to bring her husband back from the dead, right when her powers to call upon the dead start to disappear. That's a rough one to process. Okay, at number 7 is Thunderbolt. This hero first made an appearance in 1966 in a self-titled comic book series published by Charlton Comics. Only after Charlton sold all its superhero properties to DC in 1983 did Thunderbolt make his way to the DC family. But there was a good chunk of time there when Thunderbolt was completely indie. But that's the backstory of how it's made. What about the hero himself? Well, he's definitely got a cool look and name, but his abilities are kind of basic, all things considered. He's basically just got the classic enhanced strength, speed, and durability. One notable power would be his telepathy and control over animals, which is pretty cool. His origin is pretty unique, having studied with Tibetan monks who believe him to be the Vajra, or the protector of the monastery. This training gives him a mantra that allows him to push through some pretty challenging encounters using the power of his mind, repeating, "I can, I must, I will," to avoid succumbing to pain and fatigue. At number 6 is Witchblade. This comic series was first published by Top Cow Productions, part of Image Comics, starting in 1995 and ending in 2015. But picked up again in 2017 and then 2021 for new series. So this indie superhero has had quite a life already, without being touched by DC or Marvel. The superhero in the story isn't one person, but a handful of them, basically anyone who wields the Witchblade, which is a conscious, ancient gauntlet that gives the wearer superpowered abilities. The Witchblade is more than a weapon though. It's actually known as the male offspring of the Darkness and Angelus, two opposing aspects, as they're called, of the universe. And for some strange reason, whoever hosts the Witchblade must be female. The original host was Sarah Pizzini, a New York City detective. Then the weapon was taken on by Danielle Baptiste, a young dancer with impulsive tendencies, and it currently is hosted by Alex Underwood in the Revival series. The Witchblade offers powers of summoning, usually used for weaponry and armor, healing powers, superhuman strength, and shapeshifting, among other traits. Coming in at number 5 is the Spirit. This hero makes his debut back in 1940 as part of a 16-page newsprint created by Will Eisner. So this guy is very old, and makes most of his mark with the 5 million copies sold in the 1940s alone. In these newspaper prints during the Golden Age, the Spirit makes his mark as one of the most popular superheroes even during Marvel and DC's rise to fame. His abilities aren't very advanced, but considering he came in right at the cusp of the concept of superheroes becoming popular, this isn't much of a shock to me. He was still in the phase where most of the Spirit's adventures could even be confused with that of a noir detective. But he did have formidable athletic abilities, hand-to-hand combat, and almost superhuman endurance. But in later adaptations, he is eventually given superhuman longevity as well as healing abilities, solidifying him as a definitive superhero that may be responsible for many of the heroes we know today. At number 4 is the Darkness, another creation from Top Cow Productions. This anti-hero first makes his debut in 1996. But before his own publication, he appears in Witchblade number 10, introducing a dark and sort of evil looking character. But despite his work in the criminal underworld, he's still widely considered a superhero or anti-hero, so I'm keeping him on the list. The story is about Jackie Estacado, a 21-year-old gangster who, on his 21st birthday, inherits the Darkness. The Darkness is an ancient entity that predates the history of the universe and passes from one host to another between generations. When Jackie takes it on, he's given a set of powers that give him access to a dark dimension and telepathic control over the demons within that world. The Darkness also grants him mystical armor that gives him super strength, speed, stamina, healing, and even flight. Alright, at number 3 we've got Avatar Korra. Korra is a superhero. She has superpowers in her own comic book series. Most people who get lost in the magical world of Avatar might not realize that the stories being told in this world are very similar to those of your typical superhero story. Korra trains at a young age in waterbending, earthbending, and firebending, which are pretty much superpowers. Except in this world, it takes dedication and training to acquire these powers, whereas in many superhero stories, powers are often stumbled upon or gifted at birth. Following the death of Avatar Aang, Korra takes up the mantle of Avatar at the early age of 4, when she performs her impressive grasp of the Avatar powers to the Order of the White Lotus. It's a really powerful and impressive universe that Nickelodeon has put together, and it's not often that such a thorough and immersive world is started in the context of a children's cartoon. So Korra deserves a spot high on this list. At number 2 we have Starlight from The Boys. This superhero comic series was released in 2006 by Wildstorm Comics, which I know has been part of DC since 1999, but it's still not considered part of the DC universe, so I'm gonna let it count. Starlight is born to mortal parents, and when she comes out of the womb, she actually accidentally blinds her parents with her powers. Due to the increased cost of living with their new disabilities, her parents have to give up Starlight for adoption. When she joins the Seven, a group of supes as they're called, with questionable morals and intentions, things only get worse for her. She's involved in some pretty traumatic events and is treated pretty badly. But eventually she starts standing up for herself and things start to get a bit better for her. I'm gonna leave it there because this is a great story and you should get into it whether you watch the show or read the graphic novels. Okay, finally at number 1 we have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. First published by Mirage Comics in 1984, TMNT was actually meant to just be a one-off comic issue, but due to its popularity, the creators decided to keep it going. The legacy of these 4 beloved reptiles began one insignificant night when co-creators Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird were doing some brainstorming, and they thought it was a funny image to have one of the slower animals in the animal kingdom be adept at martial arts. Little did they know this would become, well, what it is today. They don't necessarily have superpowers, but I mean, Batman doesn't either. And I figured everyone loves Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I would probably argue that they're superheroes, so I put them number 1. When I remembered that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started in comics, I knew I had to put them on the list. So here they are, at number 1, right where they belong.